to the debater. We're about to move both the proposition and the opposition to more of an intense platform, to analyze, to attack, and to defend. Proposition, opposition, let's begin the face-off round.
An independent youth for a better and safer tomorrow. That is what side proposition is proposing today. Before I move into the third argument of side proposition, I would first rebut all the arguments brought out by the second speaker of side opposition. Now they came up and told us that there is 17 and 16-year-olds who get skilled. But do we not see this happening in adults as well? Obviously, this is fault with the system, and that is what the fault, and that is what the side proposition is trying to change. We are trying to change the system and give more practice to them. Yes, sir, your point.
Have you considered the difference of this statistic which you prove among adults and youth?
Yes, sir, we have considered the differences between adult and youth, but still we see the same amount of accidents happening within adults as well. But why do we have to completely stereotype the youth differently? Because just because they are younger to one person, not because they don't have motor skills. You are a youngster. Do you not think you have the responsibility and the motor skills to drive a car? That is what side proposition is believing. That we believe that every youth who is at the age of 16 or 17 has the proper motor skills to drive and control a car and to maneuver it properly and not end up in accidents. Yes, sir.
Do you feel that it is only acquiring motor skills? Don't you have any allowance in considering the sense of bearing responsibility and accountability in the age of youth?
This happens to every citizen in the world. If you would consider all that risk, why not ban driving completely? Because it has risks in it. You couldn't do that because driving has obvious necessities to it, and that is why you wouldn't do that. And the banning youngsters, stereotyping youngsters and banning them alone and stopping them from driving alone does not solve the problem. The problem is with the system, and that is what our side proposition is trying to solve. We are trying to solve the problem of accidents happening, and that is why we need to have more practice. And that is why side proposition came up and told that we are implementing a model, and in that model we recommend 50 hours of practical driving before even they get a license, and there is a gradual licensing program through which we give them levels of license. Yes, sir.
You have not detailed your model. That has misled the opposition into ambiguous.
Sir, we have explained the model in our very first argument. The guidelines which we proposed in the very first speech was our model, and that is how we are. That is what we have been following throughout this debate. And now I would move on to the substantial argument of side proposition, which is talking about accountability and who goes behind the wheel. Now we have told you that there is a practical necessity, there is a practical test and written test to be passed, and thus reducing accidents. Yes, sir.
Have you analyzed that sophisticated and developed countries which has implemented better models than what you have suggested have seen the failure in their system and they are trying to reverse?
No, sir, we have not seen them. We have not seen them reverse their system. They actually their system has failed because their system has not been enforced properly, and because there is corruption in the government. That is what we believe has misled the teens to not be in such a situation, and that is exactly why we need to enforce the system properly in Sri Lanka, which is now a new country, in which we are proposing this new system. So we obviously have the right and the ability to do it the proper way and to keep it going. Then yes.
Are you contrasting that a developed country couldn't implement properly the system which they have formulated better, and you feel that Sri Lanka, being a developing country, can establish a system which is far better than that of a developed country?
Yes, sir, obviously we can do that since we have the ability to start a new system. The developed countries have already started their new system, so thus they do not have the possible capacity to revert from their system, whilst Sri Lanka starting a new system can implement this indeed, and like a rational individual can think of. Yes, sir.
The systems which are implemented by the developed countries, they are considering on reversing that system with all the resourcefulness available at their developed standard. Sri Lanka, being a developing country, being with limited resources, how far can you justify your argument that this could be implemented?
No, sir, we do not believe that we believe that this could be implemented because it is a new system. How many times do we have to keep saying this? A new system has a better ability to implement this system. Even though a developed country has better resources, Sri Lanka, having the same amount of resources that this country has to implement this system, can indeed do so, and that is what side proposition is believing in, and that is exactly why we propose this system. So, moving on. They also came up and told us that something that happens in TV may be duplicated in real life, but we do not see, because we do not see this happening, because this only happens in movies. We see this not happening in real life because the teenagers have the rational ability to think and they have the rational ability to choose between what's right and wrong, and exactly why they do not do so, because they believe that this can be harmful and this can be risky, and exactly why they do not do this in real life. What happens in TV does not necessarily have to be happening in real life. Just because a person in TV goes rampaging around killing hundreds of people doesn't mean every teenager who has ever seen that has to go around killing everyone that he ever sees.
There is a big principle underlying behind the issue of issuing license. That is the balance between personal privileges and public security or orderly functioning of the society. That means the authorities are striving to make a balance between these two parties, these two individuals. The tempted drivers or young drivers, those who want to do driving, and the public, those who want to ensure their security. And as you have quoted in your initial argument,
Sir, improving the system will obviously solve the problem. Then why would you have to isolate teenagers who face the same problems that adults do too? Then why not ban driving completely just because you have risks in it?
In improving the system, there should be a consideration made who should be included in the improvement, who has the eligibility to be included in the improvement process.
Sir, you are a teenager. Do you not believe that you have the motor skills to turn a
I
wheel
didn't
around?
permit you to ask the question. And I would like to counter one of the initial argument that was brought out in your first speech. You quoted an exceptional talent who created a charity. This is a concern of national safety. This, when it comes to the terms of parliament, it becomes a public bill. It is issued for the national safety concerning the citizens of Sri Lanka. So we cannot define standards set on exceptional talents, but it should be applicable to the general community of the Sri Lankans.
Sir, not all teenagers are irresponsible. So if you would not consider one good thing that has teenagers done, then why would you consider isolated incidents of misbehavior by just by little number of teenagers?
Why should you ignore the hundreds of misconducts that teenagers have done so as to camouflage it with the one good deed that they have done?
Sir, they have not done one good deed. Have you not seen millions of good deeds there have been done? If you would consider the case of John and Ahmadan in Afghanistan, they actually saved a whole Sikh temple from getting killed by rampages. So this is the type of responsibility that teenagers have. Why do you still isolate them?
Scientifically proven factor is their brain is not matured enough to bear the responsibility and accountability. At the age of 18, they start developing this. I believe that we have explained that in the initial rounds, and I would like to provide you some statistics of the Californian government. The age group 16 have the highest number of fatalities and injuries. That is 61.4 per thousand. So let me move on with my argument. Issuing license is a mode of systemizing, standardizing and supervising the safety and the privileges of personals. For an example, a person might be given the opportunity of acquiring the skill, but there should be certain prerequisites for that person to have the responsibility to bear that skill.
So obviously your research is outdated. What we did in the 1900s for O-levels is not what we do in the current system for O-levels. So obviously our mental capacity has increased, and that is how a society evolves. Do you not understand this?
Education is a process which involves only certain limited skills, but driving is a process which involves the entire human body and soul. I would like to move on I would like to furnish you with an example. You see, a person having a personal vehicle can acquire the skill of driving that vehicle, but that doesn't ensure that person is eligible to ride on the street where there are million lives stepping on that street. And the primary focus of Sri Lanka should be not in reducing the age, but in ensuring better standards for the existing system. Do you know that the Sri Lankan government, as per the statement of the Transport Ministry, incurs rupees 15 billion, that is 131 million American dollars every year due to these reckless drivers?
So this happens even in the case of adults. Why would you separately isolate youngsters even after we have proved that
that your time is over? But I have the courtesy to answer your question. That is, compare the rates between adults and youngsters. It is evident, as I have provided you now, that youngsters fall into problem more than that of adults when it is concerning driving.
Esteemed panel of judges, ladies and gentlemen. Opposition today came and told us that teenagers were unbalanced, they call them irresponsible, and they stereotype them as unbalanced psychopaths. That's what the opposition came today and told us. But what it might interest you to know is that 77% of the males in the world are more prone to accidents than females. But does that mean we go ahead and ban all males from driving. No, we don't do that because we do not blindly follow statistics. We analyze them and understand what exactly is correct. And then they came and told us that the entire problem with a 16-year-old driver is that they're irresponsible. But what they have failed to show us is how a teenager is different from adults. You see adults doing all the things that teenagers do. If a teenager drinks, so does an adult. If a teenager consumes drugs, we have adults who consume drugs. If a teenager goes and commits murder, we still have adults who commit murder. And we do not believe the opposition has given us distinctly a stark difference in the psychological level on what a difference between a teenager and an adult actually is. Go ahead, sir.
Young gentlemen, according to the researchers at the National Institute of Mental Health and the University of California, Los Angeles, according to their MRI researchers, they mention that brain continues to change into the early 20s with the frontal lobes, or technically the prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and problem solving developing the last. And a pediatrician and a child psychiatrist at the University of Petersburg Medical Center mentions that in calm situations, teenagers can rationalize almost as well as adults, but stress can hijack what is called hot cognition and decision making. The frontal lobes help put the brakes on desires for thrill and taking risks. And they are also one of the last areas of the brain to develop fully. So without having the ability to judge, without the brain being developed enough to make judgments, how come they engage in driving?
So look, this is where the accountability argument of side proposition comes in, which told you that by the very definition of license that you are qualified to drive. We do not put any person behind the wheel. If you lower the age for drinking to say 16, any 16-year-old could go to a liquor store and buy drinks. But however, when you put the minimum age to drive to the age of 16, no one can just go and start driving. You have to go through a proficiency test, you have to take exams, and the government would decide whether you are accountable for your actions or not. And plus, you are given criminal responsibility at the age of 8. And if you are considered accountable for your actions at the age of 8, we do not simply understand whatever your statistics may say, why we have to push the driving age to the age of 18. Furthermore, go ahead.
My friend, whatever else harms only that person himself, but driving harms himself as well as the pedestrians and the passengers who are accompanied with the driver himself.
So that does not viably refute the argument on criminal responsibility. You are given criminal responsibility at the age of 8 and therefore thus considered responsible for your actions at the age of 8. We do not understand why the same logical reasoning could be extended and the same courtesy could be extended to 16-year-olds. Furthermore, 18 to 29, the opposition came and told us that 18 to 29-year-olds are more prone to accidents. Now, these are adults, ladies and gentlemen. These are rational individuals, as the opposition calls. But however, the statistics prove to us that more accidents occur between this age group. And we told you that it's not a problem with the age itself. We told you that it's a problem with the experience. And we told you in our model how we could give extra training to these youngsters and thereby make the system more efficient as a whole. Then they brought out media, attraction and games. They told us that, say the second speaker came and told us, look, if I have a girlfriend and I'm going to impress her, well, as much as it might hurt you to know that other people have girlfriends as well. There are adults who have girlfriends. But does that undermine their decision-making process? No, it doesn't, ladies and gentlemen. Opposition, the onus on the opposition today is to distinctly tell us why a young individual who is given criminal responsibility